A middle-aged man living alone with mother might be a failure for many, but for him, the only reason was his mother. But on that day, they murdered his mother, leaving him with a single purpose to chase and hunt them down. Welcome back to Paramount Recapped. I don't have many subscribers, but your single comment is a ray of hope to motivate me. The movie starts in a hospital room where an old man named Leo is lying in bed, looking like he's near the end of his life. Suddenly, a woman comes in and takes off his oxygen mask. Leo tells her he's going to die anyway because he has an incurable tumor. But the woman has different plans. She pushes a food cart against his neck, and the screen goes black. Next, we meet Donald, a middle-aged guy living on a farm in Belfast. He has gray hair and still lives with his mom, Florence. Donald spends his days reading newspapers, working in the fields, and hunting. He loves cars and makes some extra cash fixing up old ones in his garage. He's really close to his mom. They always have dinner together, and she's a sweet lady who's always helping others. One day, while reading the newspaper, Florence suddenly looks upset. Donald thinks it's because their neighbor passed away, but it turns out she's just heard about Leo's death, and they have a history together. That evening, Donald goes to a pub to relax. While waiting for his drink, a drunk guy starts being rude to the bartender and makes fun of Donald for living with his mom, even calling him a silverback gorilla. When Donald tells him to chill out, the guy gets aggressive, but the bartender kicks him out before anything happens. Later, Donald goes to his garage and works on an old caravan, fixing its engine and giving it a bright red paint job. The next morning, he brings Florence to see the new caravan and offers to take her to Montague Beach, where they used to go when she was younger. But she gets upset and says she's too old to travel and asks Donald to stop wasting time on machines. This hurts Donald because he just wanted to make her happy. That evening, Florence brings some beers to the caravan and says she loves the music playing. Donald turns up the volume so she can hear it from her room. He drinks the beers and falls asleep in the caravan. In his sleep, he has a strange dream where he sees his mom vacuuming the ground in a dark forest. She looks at him and says, "Help Donald," which jolts him awake. He rushes to check on her and sees two strangers quickly leaving in a car. He runs inside and finds his mom's bloodied body on the floor. Panicked, he grabs his phone and calls for help. In the next scene, the police are questioning a distraught Donald about what happened. They ask if he saw anything suspicious, and he mentions the two people in the car, but it was too dark to see much. After laying his mother to rest, Donald tries to keep busy with work and his cattle, but he struggles to cook meals since he relied on Florence for that. One night while cleaning her room, Donald discovers a stash of cash under her mattress and finds an old photo of himself, his mom, a man, and his daughter. Suddenly, he hears noises coming from the garage. Grabbing his shotgun, he investigates and finds a masked intruder. Another intruder holds him at gunpoint and tells him to drop his weapon. They force him onto a stool to hang him, but the rope doesn't work properly. Donald seizes the chance, grabs a hammer, and fights back, killing the armed guy by hitting him repeatedly. He then turns to the second guy, who looks scared and takes off his mask. Donald demands information, and the guy, named Bartosz, reveals they were sent to kill him, but knows little about the people behind it. Furious, Donald ties Bartosz up in the garage and almost calls the cops, but decides against it, wanting to handle things himself. He makes Bartosz answer the dead intruder's phone, where they learn about Gavigan, the man who ordered the hit. Bartosz is scared and worried about his sister, who's in danger because he failed his mission. He reveals that he and the dead guy were supposed to kill Donald for Gavigan, who is the same guy Donald talked to the night before. Bartosz says his sister and several other girls are being held captive. Feeling sympathy for Bartosz, Donald agrees they should help each other out. They head to the address given on the phone, and along the way, Bartosz tells Donald his sister's real name is Kaya, but they've given her a different name now. When they arrive, a car pulls up and a man leads a woman inside. Bartosz thinks it might be his sister, so he rushes in. Donald warns him to be careful and grabs a shotgun, following closely behind. As soon as Bartosz steps into the compound, he finally meets Gavigan. He tells Gavigan that Damien was supposed to meet him there, and that they completed their mission, but Gavigan isn't buying it without proof. Bartosz then finds out that the girl he saw earlier isn't his sister. She's actually there to be killed because she tried to escape. Gavigan cruelly starts choking her, while another thug named Jerome holds Bartosz back. Meanwhile, Donald has snuck into the place. While looking around, he finds a bunch of Polish passports and takes them. Back with Bartosz, he's had enough and admits that Damien was killed by Donald, the farmer, but says he managed to take Damien down. Gavigan praises Bartosz for being honest, but then brutally finishes off the girl with a hammer. Jerome picks up her body to stash it away, but as he goes in, Donald comes from behind and locks the door. Donald heads to the main hall and confronts Gavigan at gunpoint. He drags Gavigan to a caravan and knocks him out when he talks too much. They then drive off into the woods. Once there, Donald starts asking questions while they eat. At first, Gavigan acts tough, but when Donald burns his head with a boiling pot, he starts crying and spills the beans. He says a guy named Trevor hired him to kill Donald, but he doesn't know why. When Donald asks if Trevor is a fancy-looking guy, Gavigan confirms it, meaning Trevor and another guy killed Donald's mother. Donald learns from Gavigan that the boss behind everything is a powerful woman named Frankie. While Donald steps outside, Gavigan escapes, contacts Trevor, and updates him on Donald's survival, infuriating Frankie. Gavigan then ambushes Bartosz, beating him severely until Donald intervenes. Bartosz avenges himself by stabbing Gavigan, who dies after revealing that Bartosz's sister, Kaya, goes by the alias Alicia. They secretly bury Gavigan's body in the woods. Seeking answers about his past, Donald visits his uncle Eamon and learns that Joe Pierce, a close friend of Donald's mother Florence, was killed by gangsters led by Leo. Florence tried hiding Joe, but he was eventually caught and murdered. Eamon explains that Florence moved Donald to the countryside for his safety, keeping the truth hidden. Back at the caravan, Bartosz, now aware of his sister's alias, convinces Donald to help rescue her and confront Frankie and Trevor. Disguising himself as a customer, Donald books a hotel room with Kaya, who's under guard. After assuring her he's there to help, they take down the guard, and Donald learns that Bartosz misled him to prioritize Kaya's safety. Seeking more information, Donald tortures the guard, who reveals Trevor's location. But before they can leave, Jerome arrives, leading to an intense fight. Just as Jerome is about to overpower Donald, Kaya steps in, shooting him dead and helping Donald escape. They reunite with Bartosz, who's overjoyed to see his sister safe. The group flees, while Frankie and Trevor find Jerome's body and the guard, whom Frankie kills in frustration. Now Donald is set on finding Trevor. Kaya insists on joining for revenge, despite Bartosz's objections. They track Trevor to a wealthy neighborhood, where Donald plans to strike, but after seeing Frankie's daughter, he decides to wait until nightfall, giving Bartosz and Kaya money and their passports to return home. At Frankie's, she's frustrated with Trevor's failures and fires him, planning to handle Donald herself. Meanwhile, Donald checks on his uncle Eamon and finds him barely alive after a brutal attack. Eamon reveals a family secret. Frankie's dad, Joe, was a gangster involved with Donald's mother. When Joe tried to leave his family, Florence accidentally shot him, trying to stop him to protect Donald from gang threats. Eamon dies after revealing this, leaving Donald hurt and confused. Frankie soon arrives with a henchman to finish things, but Donald outwits them, knocks out the henchman, and takes Frankie hostage. Feeling guilty for not backing Donald, Bartosz sneaks out armed and heads to Eamon's, only to be captured by Trevor and a henchman. Meanwhile, Donald drags Frankie to the beach where her dad died, digs a grave, and threatens to bury her there. Frankie, desperate, starts confessing. She explains that she visited Leo, thinking he was responsible for her father Joe's death. But Leo insisted Joe was already dead when he arrived and that Florence called him to the scene. Cops framed Leo for Joe's death after that. Donald's skeptical until Frankie reveals she spoke to Florence before she died. In a flashback, Florence confesses that she loved Joe deeply, but when he tried to leave her, she accidentally shot him in an attempt to stop him. Frankie, furious at the injustice her father suffered, killed Florence in a rage. Back in the present, she begs Donald to spare her, not wanting her daughter to grow up an orphan. Donald hesitates, decides to let her go, and walks away. But Frankie attacks him with a shovel, making a dash for the caravan to get a gun. Donald reaches her first, however, and shoots her. In the final scene, Donald receives a call from Bartosz's phone. Only it's Trevor, who coldly asks about Frankie. When Donald admits he killed her, Trevor retaliates by killing Bartosz. Donald begs him to stop, even offering himself in exchange. But the call ends with a gunshot. Devastated, Donald tries calling for help but hangs up, ready to take matters into his own hands once more.